Hi everyone, this is Subra Krishnan here. I'm the CEO of Lemnisk. We're just about to get started with our webinar today, which is going to talk about DMP versus CDP and help all the participants today try to sort of decipher what these technologies can and cannot do and when to use which technology, right? So we'll just sort of get started with a quick round of introductions. We'll look at where we are with financial marketing today, and obviously there's an explosion of technologies going on. So we'll sort of try and understand what the situation is today as we look at financial marketing, and then we will dive into the individual definitions of CDPs and DMPs and what some of their key differentiators are. That said, however, we'll skip through the sort of theoretical bit very quickly and move straight into the heart of the webinar today, which is really spending time on use cases and trying to understand what use cases are relevant for a CDP and what use cases are relevant for a DMP. And I think obviously there are questions that I keep getting from marketers as I speak to them about can these technologies coexist with each other, or does the adoption of one necessarily preclude the adoption of another? And that's sort of broadly the structure of today's session. A quick introduction to Lemnisk before we get started. Lemnisk is an intelligent and secure growth marketing and customer data platform that's custom built for banking, insurance, and financial services marketers. Marketers leverage Lemnisk to maximize customer engagement and conversions across channels. And the key capabilities of the platform, at the heart of it, there is obviously the CDP, or the customer data platform, that's able to uniquely resolve and stitch a user's behavior across different data sources and channels. Number two, it is able to intelligently orchestrate every customer's journey based on their propensity towards a marketing channel, and also based on the behavior exhibited in real time on a given channel. And lastly, the platform also comes bundled with hyper-personalization capabilities that is able to craft a unique real-time message and experience for every user across multiple touch points. Now, it's a quick plug that's the end of the plug at least. Let's get started with the webinar. I think some of you would have seen this sort of cartoon that I put up here that came up some time back, talking about the 40 years of marketing. And the truth is, you could just replace 40 with 50 and maybe 60 a decade down the line, and we don't think anything is going to change. Back in the 80s, you had obviously TV as where things were taking off in a big way, and the idea was to sort of that you would have a captive audience around television. In the 90s, as the dot-com boom came, and you also had an initial CRM wave coming through, all the attention moved to those channels. Back in the 2000s, everything was about Facebook. We are in 2010 now, and nothing's changed. You all of a sudden have got Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. And of course, we're already speaking of AI and blockchain. So now, how do we as marketers really sort of future-proof ourselves, right? Because there's always going to be new technology. And I think in that context, CDP is one more TLA, or a three-letter acronym that's come up. As DMP was another, right? So really the goal is to sort of understand how can we future-proof ourselves, right? And especially when you have these diverse technologies, this is what your typical digital marketing stack ends up looking like, right? So you typically have maybe a CMS or a website optimization tool powering your website. You have an email platform. You have maybe a DMP or a programmatic platform. You have an app, a text messaging platform, a customer care sort of call center, contact center system. And then, of course, on the data side, you've got CRM data, you've got transactional data, you've got next best offers that is getting produced by our analytics systems. And these systems are simply not, systems and data sources are simply not talking to each other, resulting in a siloed customer experience, right? More importantly, it also means that you're not able to respond to the real-time needs that is absolutely a must today in today's digital ecosystem, right? And your segmentation tends to be personalized at best. right? I think what we speak of when we refer to a CDP, obviously, is a system that is able to sit on top of your data sources and channels. By its very nature, CDPs are very API driven, so they're very easy to integrate and use. A very, very critical capability of the CDP is its ability to respond in real time, right, to any behavior exhibited by the user or to any trigger that is detected. And of course, by virtue of adopting a CDP, fundamentally you're able to look at every user as an individual rather than as part of a segment, right? So that's really what the future of these siloed ecosystems look like, and it's no wonder that all major clouds are now talking about the need for a CDP, right? So let's get started with the technical definition of what a DMP and is and what a CDP is. These are obviously two of the hottest technologies right now in the MarTech space, and I see a lot of confusion among marketers with respect to what each one of these technologies mean, and what is the right way to really understand these two technologies and when to go for which, right? So let's start with a very quick definition of DMP and a CDP, right? When we speak of a DMP, we're obviously looking at a system that is able to stitch in real time audience from online sources. So whether it's your website, your mobile website, your app, your third-party ecosystem, or your partner websites, all of that online sources, right? The DMP is really able to stitch that very effectively. Whereas if you look at the CDP, it is able to stitch in real-time audience data from online sources or offline sources. It doesn't matter, right? So it could be a CRM system, or it could be a contact center, it could be a branch software, it could be agent software. It doesn't really matter. It can go into these types of systems as well, right? Again, from a DMP standpoint, it targets users basis anonymous cookies or device IDs, whereas CDPs generally target users basis PII, as well as cookies and device IDs. DMPs are used by marketers to sharpen online targeting and personalization. So really the ability to ingest online behavior quickly and use it for activation purposes. That's where you use a DMP for. The primary use case of a CDP is for cross-channel personalization and orchestration, right? The worth of a DMP, the value of a DMP really lies in its ability to bring a lot of DSP or exchange integrations, both in terms of exchanges for media as well as data, right? So any DMP should have tons and tons of these integrations where you can really push your segments into these activations. So if you need wide reach on the media exchanges, you need to go for a DMP. Whereas if you look at a CDP, the value of a CDP lies in its ability to bring in multiple MarTech and AdTech tool integrations, including DMPs, as we'll notice in just a bit, right? So that's the definition of a DMP and a CDP. Very quickly, if we deep dive into what each one of these means, right? So if I look at the type of data, DMPs focus exclusively on online data, and the primary mechanism of stitching tends to be cookies. As I said, in the case of CDPs, it's able to integrate all kinds of data. In fact, it should be largely data agnostic. As long as there is a unifying ID available in any data source, it should be able to ingest it very quickly. And it targets both anonymous cookies as well as PII. Again, in terms of a DMP, generally a DMP has got limited storage, right, in terms of time. So typically DMP store data for anywhere between 90 to 180 days, although these days it's not uncommon at all for a DMP to store data for longer periods of time. However, the value of that longer storage is in some cases questionable. For example, if a user deletes or clears their cookie, right? And DMPs are generally able to target users falling into a particular segment. Again, the campaigns are created for an anonymous set of users. From a CDP standpoint, it's very, very crucial and critical that a CDP stores every user's behavior and data for a persistent on a persistent manner and for extended periods of time, theoretically infinite, right? And again, a very important distinction that a CDP brings in is in its ability to really target every user as an individual, and therefore the journeys that it creates should also be at a single user level, right? Yeah, again, DMP captures data predominantly using cookies, and whereas CDPs capture it across systems using APIs. And of course, we'll spend some time looking at the use cases, right? Great. Now, with the theory part behind us, let's dive into some practical use cases. I think this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where a lot of marketers come and ask me, for example, in sort of client meetings that we go to, in pitch meetings, okay, when do I look at a CDP? When do I look at a DMP, right? So what we will do now is try and look at a very practical and simple framework that you can use to understand when a CDP is useful and when a DMP is useful, right? So let's look at maybe a banking use case here. Let's say there is an existing customer of a bank visiting the bank website and researching a credit card, albeit anonymously. That means the user is not inside the net banking section, right? But they are just researching a credit card on the website, right? And in this particular case, the particular user in question also visits the branch regularly, right? So the question is, great. So recognizing that the user is likely to visit the branch again in the near future, how soon and how indeed can we keep the branch informed, right? So to understand how to make this happen, let's sort of ask ourselves a few simple questions. First, where is the intent signal originating from, right? Or where is the originating signal? Is it online and offline, and what ID is it coming against, right? So clearly in this case, the intent signal is coming from the website, which is an online channel, and the ID it is coming against is a cookie, which presumably is stitched using a DMP or using an analytics system like Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics. It's stitched against the customer ID already, right? So that is where the intent signal is coming from. Where do we want to use the signal, this intent, and what ID does the end destination have? In this case, presumably there is a branch CRM software, and you need to push the signal into the branch CRM ID, right? And it could typically be a customer ID or an email or a phone, but that's the destination, right? How soon? Instantly or in batch? Depends. For example, you might decide that, you know what, I want my branch to be updated once a week with last week's signals, for example, right? But in this case, there are specific instances where you might want to send the signal quickly, right? So maybe if there's a branch CRM, branch relationship manager for the customer, maybe the relationship manager potentially could place an outbound call within a couple of hours of the user exhibiting this behavior. So yeah, I mean, you have to decide what the experience needs to be and appropriately decide how soon the signal needs to be tapped, right? Great. So now that's the use case. Decision time. What system would you use, a CDP or a DMP? Clearly, basis the definition that we looked at earlier, and given that a branch is also involved here, generally a DMP is not the right fit to solve this use case. Therefore, you would go with the CDP, right? So let's look at a few more use cases and try and break each use case into where the signal is originating from, where is the destination where I want to use the signal, how soon, and therefore what is the right system which can solve this, right? Great. So let's say you're an auto insurance company and your customer's policy is about to expire, right? And this is a time when a customer usually goes shopping. So what do you want to do as a marketer? You want to make sure that if you find the user on researching competition, you want to bid higher and potentially give them a retention offer, right? So where is the signal originating from? In this case, this signal is originating from the CRM system, which is again typically an offline system, right? The destination here is search, Google Ads, right? So which is again an online system. How soon do you want to do this? Generally speaking, you want to automate this and make it available on a daily basis. So going by our framework again, which system is the right one? Again, it's a CDP which is going to be effective in this case, right? Because the originating signal, while it's online, the destination signal in this case, while the originating signal is from an offline channel, the destination is an online channel, right? Great. Sticking with insurance, in this case, let's go to a term insurance sort of use case. Let's say there's a prospect that's taken a 100K term insurance quote and they're dropping off. The next time they're on your website, you want to personalize their experience basis this behavior. And this is a classic example of why we see a lot of confusion in this space with regards to DMPs and CDPs, because as you'll realize, as we try to decode this, you'll realize that so many systems can actually solve this problem for you. So in this case, the signal is originating online, whereas the destination where you want to use the signal is also online. And of course, you want it to be utilized in real time, right? So going by our definition, a DMP can do this, absolutely. So can a CDP. In fact, in this case, you could argue your standalone CMS could do it too. If you have a Sitecore system or an Adobe Experience Manager or a Target, all these systems could potentially do this as well, right? So of course, this is one of those use cases where you can have any system potentially solving this problem for you, right? Let's look at the next use case, right? A user came to your website, submitted a lead, your call center tried calling them, and the user didn't pick up, or picked up and they said, call me back later. Classic use case, more than 60% of leads actually follow this funnel. It's called negative disposition at the call center side. Now, let's say this particular lead is back on your website. Ideally, you want to recognize this signal and potentially tell the contact center to call the customer right now, or maybe within a minute, right? So the originating signal is on the website, which is online. So the lead has come back to your website. The destination is you need to trigger a call center call, so which is obviously an offline ecosystem, and you want to do it real time, right? So you don't want to be doing this next day, or whatever, because the user is back on the website researching again. Clearly, they're engaged with the brand, right? The time is now, right? Now, again, only a CDP can do this, right? So I'm sure some of you are wondering, okay, great. So looks like a CDP can practically solve everything that a DMP can, but maybe the vice versa is not true. So is that the case always? Or are there use cases that maybe a CDP is not really geared to do very well, whereas a DMP would be ideal to solve a use case like that? So let's sort of look at this particular next use case, because that's actually a very, very interesting one where you probably use a DMP, right? So let's say there is a visitor that visited your website, looked at a product and dropped off, right? And the classic retargeting use case, you want to retarget them on the display ad exchange, and importantly, because you believe this is a hot user or a relevant user, you want to find similar look-alike audiences, right? So where is the signal originating from? Website. In this case, again, it's an online channel, and the destination is an ad exchange, again, which is online. How soon? Real time. Now, there is no way a CDP can solve this very, very well, because CDPs are not really geared to provide vast reach and to provide lookalike audiences effectively, right? That is firmly in the domain of DMPs. DMPs are, any good DMP will have so many rich integrations available for you to solve these kinds of use cases where you really want a wide variety of exchanges. You want probabilistic cross-device mapping. You want the ability to onboard, let's say, a third-party data source and sort of stitch that into the signal and create even more sharper segments. Use different bidding strategies on each of these exchanges. Yeah, I mean, all that is what DMPs are going to solve for you so effectively, right? So this is a very clear example of a use case which only DMPs are geared to do, and only they can do very, very well, right? Right. Last use case before we, well, actually, in that row, there is a small issue there. My apologies. You can see that there are actually two use cases that got merged there. The first one relates to a customer using an upsell email, opening an email, and then the need to send them an app push. But then there's also a prospect researching an MF and then clicking on a chatbot, right? So let's just look at, sorry about that. The row is meant for the email intersecting with app push use case. So let's look at that use case first. So the use case is an existing customer opened an upsell email, right? But you know that they also have your app, and ideally you want to latch on to the signal that they opened your email, and you want to send them an app push notification. So again, the originating signal is online, the destination is online again. But generally speaking, the problem here is that DMPs don't generally stitch email or PII data, right? So the email opening is something that generally cannot be tracked on real-time basis. Now, there are circuitous ways of doing this. For example, you could go to your email platform, tell them to provide the response data to your upsell campaign against hashed customer IDs or hashed email IDs. You can bring those hashed email IDs or hashed customer IDs into a DMP where presumably the stitching already exists against a cookie or a device ID. And then you might potentially be able to do these kinds of stitching, get the corresponding device IDs, and then pass that device IDs, download it and send it to your app push vendor, who can then use it as a segment. But look at the amount of effort needed for you to do that. You would have practically lost the intent signal and its value, right? So typically, many of these intent signals have got a half-life, have got a very low half-life, right? Within hours of the intent signal, the value of the signal is already down by half. Another few hours, down to 1/4, and so on and so forth, right? In 2 or 3 days, practically the customer would no longer associate with that signal in any meaningful fashion, right? So therefore, you want this to be a completely automated process where typically the email gets opened, and within a matter of typically a few seconds, max a minute, you want to send a push notification, right? And that is something that CDPs are really geared to do very effectively, right? Last use case, and this is a very common use case. Again, chatbots are becoming so prevalent these days, and you have a lot of conversational sort of bots that are coming that many of you are probably integrating as we speak, or have integrated, or have in your roadmap. So let's look at a use case where a prospect is researching a mutual fund, maybe, and on your website, and is clicking a chatbot. Now, the most logical interpretation is they have some question pertaining to the mutual fund that they're discussing, right? So that they're researching. So the question is, can you get the chatbot experience started on the mutual fund, where maybe you could ask the user, hey, we notice you are researching this mutual fund. Did you have a question on this mutual fund? Here are some common questions. So ideally, you want the workflow to be sharp, and only if the user doesn't want to ask the question around mutual funds, can they potentially start on some other custom workflows, right? So again, the originating signal is online. The destination is also the chatbot. Now again, a CDP can solve it, although again, in this case, a DMP could potentially solve it as well. If your chatbot is able to consume the signal in real time, right? So yeah, that are some of the sort of scenarios we looked at. Again, to summarize, you are going to use this simple framework to understand how to really figure out whether it's a CDP or a DMP that can solve this use case. If the originating signal and the destination signal are online, generally speaking, DMPs can do it. In certain cases, they can do it very, very, very well. For example, if it's just taking behavior data from a website or an app and using it again back in the website or app, or potentially using it in an exchange, that is when DMPs can use it very, very, you can use a DMP. Whereas if there are more circuitous online to online use cases, CDPs are probably geared to do that better. And of course, if the destination signal or the originating signal involves an offline channel like a branch or a contact center or any of these systems, or a CRM system or any other PII system, then you probably want to be thinking about a CDP, right? So great. So can they coexist with each other? Well, I think the short answer is really, if you have the budget. If you have the budget to buy both, then you should buy both, right? Because especially top of the funnel acquisition, lookalikes, retargeting, that's something that DMPs can do very effectively. Whereas you probably do need a CDP if you care about a sort of consistent cross-channel customer experience, right? So, and in fact, there are many sort of CDP implementations we are seeing now where a DMP is actually being used to enrich an individual user's profile and drive better personalization, right? So, and similarly, you can potentially put specific CDP data segments into a DMP, right? And potentially target, sharpen the targeting against that particular audience, right? So that's sort of a quick look at DMP versus CDPs. I hope this was a useful webinar to you. One quick sort of note before we close the webinar: we are seeing a lot of banking and financial services institutions actually moving to implement CDPs because clearly there is a need to really unify data across different touch points and get into a unified customer view and process that in real time. So yeah, I mean, CDPs are going to form a very, very integral part of the marketing stack. As I mentioned before, no wonder, therefore, that you're seeing a lot of uptake for CDPs. You're seeing the large marketing clouds also starting to speak about their respective CDP releases. So yeah, that should you want to, so you can access it any point in time. If you want to talk to us or understand more about DMP, CDPs, or in general, just sort of deep dive into your marketing strategy, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always write to us at marketing@lemnis.co. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We keep pushing out great content that keeps getting positive responses to us. So yeah, that I hope the session was useful to you. Thank you again for your time, and have a great day ahead.